Hey everybody, it's GombletX and welcome back to another Arena Cube Draft. As always, we got some powerful options here. Let's see what might be the best to pick one, pack one. So I'm kind of interested in these colorless options, both being very good, and it's always good to get a powerful colorless option early on in any draft format because it leaves you open to whatever colors you see most represented in what's getting passed to you. Both Stonecoil Serpent and Maze Mind Tome are powerful in a variety of decks. Stonecoil Serpent better in more mid-rangey sort of creature-based decks, and Maze Mind Tome a bit better in more controlling decks that want to use the early game to draw some cards, scry a little, and also gain some life off of this card. So both of these are really powerful colorless options, really solid ways to go. So I think I'm going to pick one of these here. There's nothing in any of the colors that is like insanely powerful to me. Like Mirari's Wake is pretty busted, but it does tie you into two colors immediately, so it is far off from a colorless card in that sense. Like we'd be taking something that really locks us into wanting to be green and white over something that can go in almost anything. And Maul of the Skyclaves is quite good in a very aggressive deck. You want to have a lot of 1 and 2 mana creatures for this card because you want to have creatures out for it to attach onto turn 3 here. I think I'm going to go with Maze Mind Tome here, maybe play another slower, more controlling deck here if we can, and of course we are past multiple great control options here, and not much for aggressive decks, so it looks like Maze Mind Tome over the Stonecoil Serpent may have been the correct pick here. We have Doomscar, which is a fantastic Wrath effect. If you foretell this, then you can play it on turn 3. So you could foretell it turn 2, cast it turn 3 if you're against a incredibly aggressive deck. Otherwise, it only costs 5 mana to play it if you draw it later in the game. That is not bad at all, not that expensive. Pact of Negation's pretty nice. It allows you to hold up a counterspell while holding up 0 mana at all. So you just have a nice little panic button if your opponent starts doing just some really absurd spell and you were not prepared for it. Pact of Negation makes sure you are always prepared for something as long as you have that 5 mana in your next turn. Supreme Will is nice because it's both a counterspell and a draw spell. I think with Maze Mind Tome as the start, I am definitely leaning towards some of these more controlling cards, and most of the pack is more controlling. Even Sweltering Sun's kind of the red Wrath effect. I think I'm going to roll with Doomscar here. I think that there are just tons of creature-based decks in the cube. There's very powerful aggressive ones in red and white, and a little slower, more rampy ones in green as the base, but Doomscar is definitely always going to kill some stuff, especially if you draft it early on and you can build a deck around it. Just have a deck that doesn't run a ton of creatures, and mainly your creatures are coming in later in the game after you will have potentially already cast your Doomscar and gotten like a 2 or 3 for 1 on your opponent. This pack seems quite solid here as well, multiple ways to go. Fabled Passage is always good because you're always going to run this in any deck you end up playing, unless you're like monocolored, so this would be good whatever we end up in. Irrigated Farmland will be good if we end up in like blue-white control. Murderous Rider seems like a good option for Orzhov. It's both a removal spell and a life-linking creature that can help us like trade off with something as well as gain a couple life in the early game, so that's pretty solid. I like Murderous Rider and Fabled Passage the most out of here, I think, for us. And yeah, I think I am going to go with the Suggester here and just pick up a Fabled Passage because it's just not a card that's going to get cut out of anything our deck ends up being. And it is possible that we don't end up in black for that Murderous Rider. So what do we have now? Again, I feel like I'm not seeing a lot in terms of aggressive spells. We've got a couple options in blue for late game flashy sort of spells, and one good option in red that I'm seeing. I guess a few options in red. In red we have Lava Coil, a nice cheap removal spell, Magma Quake, which can be Wrath effect if your opponent isn't playing any flyers, but this also kills Planeswalkers, which is pretty big. Crush the Weak can kill just cheap creatures from your opponent's deck. So these are all decent options for a slower red deck, but it would be really weird and kind of difficult to end up in like Boros control, like red-white control, so I'm a little leaning more towards the blue cards, and I think the best for blue control would be Voracious Great Shark. For 5 mana, we get to flash this in, counter a creature spell or an artifact spell, and get a 5/4 on the board. Seems better for controlling decks than Thrix is, but Thrix is solid as well. It flashes in as a 4/5 flyer, and it makes your other spells that cost 5 or more cheaper. So that's better in like blue-green with a little bit of ramp going on, making all of your big spells uncounterable and cheaper. Great Shark a little better in more controlling decks where you're just like, I'm going to counter something and then I have just a big old threat on the board for later. So Lay Claim is pretty nice. It does cost a lot of mana, but it has the cycling ability if you can't afford it. And it's just a nice late game card in Cube because there are obviously a lot of huge, big impact cards in the Cube that this can steal. There's also Solemnity Vision, which is nice because we get to run this over like an island, and this is a land when we need a land, and otherwise we just get to grab the best instant or sorcery from our top 6, whatever we need at the time. I think that this card does go up a lot in quality when you have like wrath effects that are really important to hit at the right time. So I think I'm actually going to try out the Solemnity Vision here. It helps us like dig for a Doomscar when we need it. And in blue-white, we're likely to have a ton of different instant sorcery style effects and hopefully a lot of unique ones so we can grab whatever we need at the time off of that sort of effect. Now we have Into the Royal, which can just slow your opponent down a little bit. You do get to draw a card when you cast it as well if you cast it later in the game. There's also Bag of Holding, which is another kind of draw engine like the Maze Mind Tome. This does require us to draw and discard, but everything we discard into it, we can put back in our hand at a later time for 4. Yeah, I think the bag seems pretty solid here. Fairgrounds Warden would be alright, but it's not a great combo with Wrath effects. We already have a Doomscar, and I'd be looking for more in blue-white control. I think I will go with a Bag of Holding here. So we have Hypnotic Sprite here. Not the best counterspell. 3 mana to counter something that costs 3 or less. It's just a bit much. It also is just a 2 mana 2/1 flyer that's not that impressive, and it requires double blue, so kind of a difficult mana cost for early in the game. Not great with wrath effects and stuff like that. I'm kind of leaning more towards Folio Fancies over anything here. Folio Fancies can be just a big finisher in a control deck. If you can just wrath the board, you can deal with everything they have. This can mill your opponent pretty fast because of the conjunction of its 2 abilities. If you have enough just powerful draw engines in your deck, we already have like Maze Mind Tome and Bag of Holding there. Bag of Holding does make us discard, so it doesn't make our hand any bigger, but Maze Mind Tome does draw us additional cards. With enough stuff like that, the Folio Fancies can consistently just be milling our opponent like 5 or 6 cards a turn off of that 3 mana effect. That can stack up really quickly when everybody's deck size is only 40 cards. I think I like Spectral Sailor the most here. Just a little 1/1 flyer you flash in at any time, but then it's a mana sink that just can draw you a ton of cards. But there are other options. Disdainful Stroke is a good counterspell because it's cheap and it counters most of what you want to counter. It counters the big late game plays. Actually, with Solemnity Vision here, and yeah, because we're in Cube, I think countering 4 or greater stuff is really good. Raven's Warning is nice. It gets a 1/1 flyer, draws you 1 card, and then puts something from your sideboard on your deck. So if you get enough good stuff in your sideboard, then I think the Raven's Warning can be solid there. But yeah, I think Disdainful Stroke actually, like now that I think of it, just being able to counter stuff with mana value 4 or greater just seems really good in this cube. I think the only decks it's not good against are the very aggressive ones. I am going to just take the nice dual land here, the Glacial Fortress. We definitely want some good mana fixing to be able to cast our double white spell on turn 3 here, be able to Doomscar turn 3. Silent Departure's alright. It bounces something for 1 and then it bounces something for 5, so that's fine there. Here we have Supreme Will or Pact of Negation. This is actually a pretty hard pick. If we get enough instant speed stuff, which we really do look like we're doing here, we just have a ton of stuff at instant speed, mana sinks we can use at instant speed. It's not that hard to hold up counter magic if your deck is a ton of instants, so actually I'm leaning a little towards Supreme Will here. But if we were like a tap out kind of deck where we had tons of things we wanted to just drop down during our turn and it was difficult to hold up counter spells, then it would be an easy Pact of Negation here. But here, because we're focusing so heavily on instant speed stuff and instant speed effects on like these artifacts, it shouldn't be too difficult to always hold up a counter spell if we've drawn it. And Supreme Will gives us the versatility, the flexibility of being able to also just draw a card off of this when we don't need a counter. Did Wield of Thrix? I guess we could play that here. It's another flash card, so it's good because we can hold up all of our instant speed counterspells. Just cast this at the end step of our opponent's turn, start hitting them with that as a game ender. But there's also Think Twice here, which is good for just instant sorcery-based deck. I think I will just take the Thrix here, though. Really going in on the flash strategy. Really happy to see a Castle Vantress this late. This is great in a controlling deck. Another one of those effects that you get to hold up and use at the end of your opponent's turn after you've decided you're not countering anything. And you can just keep scrying off of this to make sure that you keep hitting gas instead of whatever you don't need at the time. Like maybe you don't need lands, maybe you don't need non-lands, anything like that. All right, so I think I'm going to just jam a Sphinx's Revelation here. But there's definitely an argument for passing this. I think the biggest argument for passing this is that it's possible that it wheels. That being said, this card is incredible for this sort of strategy, so I don't really want to put any risk at all into this not wheeling, but I don't know, there's other very powerful cards in here. I think the weakest card we could take is Illumination. That's just not going to be it. But between these other two cards, like both of these are also solid picks for us, and they're less likely to wheel. Mechagodzilla the Weapon, pretty much impossible to wheel because it is a colorless card, good in any deck. I guess not as good in our deck, but Starnheim Unleashed, I think, is the biggest pick in contention with Sphinx's Revelation. This is just an absolute game ender, really big way to close out the game. You foretell this on 2, and then once you get to the late game, once you've stabilized, just bam, I'm going to dump out, 2 4/4 flying vigilance creatures for only 5 mana, or 3 of them for only 7. Like, it's a huge effect. But I am going to take Sphinx's Revelation here. This is also just an absolutely massive effect, and it's perfect for our deck because we get to use it at instant speed without holding any mana up. Talrand actually seems quite nice for us. We have a boatload of instants right now, and we're really kind of going in on that strategy. I guess we only have 4 instants, 1 sorcery, but we are really digging for them. We are trying to have a ton of them in here. We have 4 instants and like multiple flash cards. But yeah, Talrand can be really nice in a deck with a lot of instants and counter spells. If you can protect Talrand on the board and just keep manipulating what your opponent can do, Talrand can just take over the game with the 2/2 flyers. I think it's better for our deck than any of these other cards. Mirror's Call could be decent because we get to play it as a land in the early game, and then whenever we're flooded out, just get a couple angels. Waker of Waves I'm not a huge fan of unless you have some of the black reanimation spells, because then you can discard this and then bring it back, which is fun. Yeah, and then Chart, of course, is just draw 2, discard 1 for 2 mana. Not that exciting for us. I am going to take a Talrand here. Talrand, not a great combo with Wrath effects, and we do have some of those, so that is a bit of a risk. But I think it's definitely worth the risk for the games where Talrand does go off with a bunch of counterspells in hand. So, another difficult pick here. I don't think we're a Felidar Retreat deck. This is better in more aggressive decks because you want to be able to have both of these abilities be great, but even just landfalling a land out and getting a 2/2 is fine. But it's also a sorcery speed spell that costs 4, so a little hard to justify in a deck that's constantly wanting to hold up mana. I think the biggest 3 options for us are Search for Azcanta, which late in the game, once you flip this, can really take over the game because then you draw the best card out of your top 4 every turn. Only grabs non-creatures, but we are already going towards that theme. Then there's a great counterspell we can cycle, the Neutralize, and there's also a great dual land for us, Temple. We've seen these white-blue duels going late, so I'm pretty sure we can wheel Temple, and we might even be able to wheel Neutralize here. But I think my pick order here is Search for Azcanta, followed by Neutralize, followed by the Temple. And this is actually another kind of difficult pick here. Onto Inversion can obviously just invert the game into your favor, destroying all non-land permanents, so destroying all of your opponent's creatures, planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, whatever crazy nonsense they have going on. So when you're a deck like ours that's trying to just get a lot of card advantage, have a bunch of cards sitting in our hand rather than on our board wipes like this can be quite good, but it does cost 8 mana, so it's a very late game spell. That being said, it's also a land on the front half, so anytime we don't have the mana to do it, if we just need more mana, we can play it as a land, so it's really solid. But then there's also just a great counterspell here, Saw It Coming. I think with like Talrand and all the instant speed stuff, I'm going to take Saw It Coming first, but I do really want to wheel that onto Inversion. That would be quite great. Ooh. We have a couple options here. We have a Cloud Blazer and Approach of the Second Sun as my favorite two options out of this pack. Anointed Procession isn't really for us. We're not doing much in terms of tokens, just Talrand. So Cloud Blaze is just good in our colors. 5 mana for a 2/2 flyer. We gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. That's a pretty big card advantage swing. Often this can trade into like a smaller creature and you've gained life, drawn cards. So just a really good swing in the game. That being said, Approach of the Second Sun is a game-ending card that's not very interactable unless your opponent has like counter spells, then they could counter it the first time you play it. But the second time you play it, even if they counter it, you win. Yeah, I like this a lot in a deck with just a ton of instants and sorceries. It gives us a way to win the game without having to put anything on the board even, which is quite nice. And it's a really good way to win the game with multiple draw spells, because if you can draw into it, get closer to it after you've cast it, you can make the clock go even faster. Like Search for Azcanta is incredible with it, because then we cast Approach from the Second Sun, we just dig for it off of the Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. It only takes 2 turns to win off of it instead of the full 7. Don't really like Thassa's Oracle here, but maybe we mill ourselves enough that that's okay. Zatalpa, a really late game play, but if you're controlling the game out in the early game, maybe you get to those high mana costs. Yeah, I guess I'll grab a Zatalpa. That could be a potential late game ender for us. We're not going to have a lot of creatures, so we're not a deck for powerful equipment like Shadow Spear. Not going to have a lot of token production, so we're not a Divine Visitation deck, which leaves Baral's Expertise or Arch of Orazca. Orazca's a great land in the late game, but it does tap for colorless, so it makes our mana base worse. We already do have 2 duels in our colors and a Fabled Passage, so our mana's looking pretty good. I think I will take an Arch of Orazca here. That could be good in our deck. Shouldn't make our mana base that poor. We do have an Evolving Wilds or an Essence Scatter here. I am interested in stockpiling the counter spells now. We have a lot of things that go really well with them. Search for Azcanta, Salundi Vision, Talrand, lots of stuff that just really wants a ton of counter spells in this deck. And now I guess we can take the Illumination, or we can take the blue-red duel. I will just scoop up an Illumination here. Don't know how likely I am to play that. We did wheel Waker of Waves or Chart a Course. Neither I'm that excited by, but I guess I'll take a Chart a Course, see if that ends up being a play for us. Now we have Fragmentize, Artifact Enchantment Hate, or Temple of Enlightenment. You know, definitely now that we have that colorless land, that Arch of Orazca, we're just going to take a Temple here. But Fragmentize is like an option, but we're hoping if they have any Artifact or Enchantment kind of threats, we can just counter them with something. We're not going to play any of this stuff. We did wheel the Cloud Blazer, so I guess that is a possibility. So the fact that Cloud Blazer wheeled means Sphinx's Rev may have wheeled. We wheeled Thassa's Oracle as well, so that's also an option. If we think we're going to end up drawing like way too many cards in any of these games and just running out of mana. Well, hopefully because every other white-blue duel wheeled, we can wheel the white-blue Pathway. That'd be pretty solid. We have Cosmos Elixir, which is great when you stabilize, because you stabilize and then you just gain some life off this and start drawing 2 cards a turn. Obviously pretty huge with Approach of the Second Sun. It digs you into that pretty quickly. So I like Cosmos Elixir a lot. Not a massive fan of Immortal Sun in more controlling decks. You obviously have to tap out for it on turn 6, which is a lot of mana. You are like fully tapping out, and you're not getting all of the benefits of this, just your spells cost 1 less and you draw 2 cards a turn. Also, if we end up with any Planeswalkers, it's not a good combo with those, and in control decks, Planeswalkers tend to be quite good. This seems more of like a card for a mid-range deck to me. Definitely not the little Death Toucher. I guess I'll take the Cosmos Elixir here, but not a super exciting pack for us. The most exciting thing for us there might even just be the Pathway, but I'm pretty certain it'll wheel, seeing how every other card there did. I think Disallow seems great for us here. 3 mana, counter a spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, just counter anything we need to. But Scholar of the Lost Trove is a great late game card, letting us recast a powerful spell from our graveyard, be it an instant, sorcery, or artifact. There's also Exclusion Mage, which is a decent tempo play to just slow your opponent down, but again, that seems more for tempo decks than control decks, because sure, you slow your opponent down with it, but you put it back in their hand, they just immediately recast it, and we're not going to have mana to cast a counter spell after we've cast an Exclusion Mage in this deck. So I'll just grab a Disallow. I do like Declaration in Stone here, but The fact that our opponent does get to draw a card off of whatever we kill is not awesome for us, but I think it's better than anything else in this pack. Like Fibblethip maybe. Just a little chump blocker draws us a card when we plays it. That seems fine. Skyclave Cleric, a little 1/3 chump blocker that gains some life when we play it. These are both okay. There's also a blue-white dual land with the Rogrin Triome. I think I will just take Declaration Stone. It exiles any creature that we need to exile, but our opponent does get to investigate. That means that they get a clue that they can sacrifice to draw a card. So essentially we exile one of their cards, but they get to draw a card when we play this. So not incredible, but I think it's still solid here. It's also sorcery speed, which is a little painful for us. I like Swift Response a lot here. Instant speed removal spell. Sure, it only kills tapped things, but unless they have vigilant creatures, that's going to kill whatever we need it to, because we don't really care about killing things that aren't attacking us in this sort of strategy. Yeah, Swift Response seems solid. Sphinx of Foresight's pretty solid as well. If it's in your opening hand, you get to scry 3. Otherwise, it's just a 4-mana 4/4 flyer that scries you 1 throughout the game. Yeah, I don't really think we're looking for flyers or more creatures at all. We're trying to win with like Approach of the Second Sun or Zatalpa, just some ridiculous 7 or 8 mana card in the late game. Spell Pierce, I mean, counter it unless they pay 2, so it doesn't counter much in the late game. But it is a counter spell, and we are still very interested in those. With Bag of Holding, Mazemind Tome, and Cosmos Elixir, Thirst for Knowledge actually seems potentially pretty good here. 3 mana to draw 3 and then discard 2 is still okay, and if we draw an artifact that's not good at the time, like if we draw a Bag of Holding when we're not wanting to dump mana into it, we can discard it there. I like Thirst for Knowledge a little better than Spell Pierce here, just because Spell Pierce is one of the easier counter spells to actually get out of, like to actually have the mana to pay for later in the game. And I do like Treasure Map to get more artifacts in the deck to combo with the Thirst for Knowledge, as well as this just being a good card in controlling decks. It gives us another small mana sink to use during our opponent's end step, just scrying 1 every turn until this flips. Then we get some treasures. We can draw cards off those treasures. Really gives us a nice bit of card draw there in the late game. Keeps us all fueled and ready to go. Well, pretty much guaranteed to be Warrant and Warden here. Our other options are a 1/2 that can't be blocked. That's pretty mediocre. That's really in here to combo with cards like Curiosity, but neither of these are things we're playing in this deck. We're just not creature heavy at all for these sort of cards. Definitely taking Warrant Warden. This is an instant speed way to interact with their attackers or blockers, or alternatively a 4/4 flyer to try to close out the game if we've got things under control. Now, what do we have here? No instant speed effects, which I'm not a huge fan of, but Inscription of Insight does seem like a really big effect. For 4 mana, bounce 2 things back to their hands, or scry 2, draw 2, or create a creature with power toughness equal to the cards in your hand. And if you can kick it in the late game, if you have the 8 mana for it, it's absolutely massive. Get a big old creature, scry 2, draw 2, bounce 2 things. Definitely just going to take the pathway here. We did wheel that white-blue pathway, which is nice. Exclusion Mage, Pride of Conquerors, Scholar of the Lost Trove. We're 100% not a Pride of Conquerors deck. We've got a few artifacts for the Scholar, and quite a few instants and sorceries, but a lot of our instants are counter spells, which don't combo well. I think I'd still just take a Scholar here. Definitely Skyclave Cleric. The last of these picks are going to be quite easy. It's just going to be the only cards in our colors at the end here. Did wield a Spell Pierce, so we may consider running that. I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with a Spell Pierce in here, to be honest. Might be an actual thing. I don't think we're doing Folio anymore. Alright, 47 cards, so 7 cards to cut in this deck. Don't think I'm doing the Thassa's Oracle thing. Honestly, I think we cut just real low on creatures in this deck. Just focus on these non-creature spells. Just go all in on that sort of control deck. Like, look at this curve of non-creatures just countering and destroying everything we can. That's a 2 mana spell when we need it to be. We just cast a Warrant. Yeah. Not so interested in Thrix anymore, but it does make Approach of the Second Sun uncounterable in the mirror match. Kind of like Thrix and Zatalpa out of here and just really go in on Approach of the Second Sun as the win con. So we need to cut 2 cards now. Spell Pierce is a possibility. Chart a Course is a possibility. I think Bag of Holding is the weakest of our artifacts, so that's possible. I think I do want to keep in just an 18 land deck here, 17 lands plus 1 Salundi Vision. Because we have like Sphinx's Rev we want 1,000,000 mana for. Illumination's not that good, but it is instant speed, which gives it a bit of an edge over stuff like Inscription of Insight. Like, this is really powerful, but it's not instant speed. Yeah, we do have to dump 4 mana into the Elixir. And it's only good when we stabilize, and we have to spend all that mana in the main phase. I think there's a few reasons I'm not actually that massive of a fan of Cosmos Elixir here. But then if we cut that and Bag of Holding, then we're down a lot on the number of artifacts, and then we might want to actually cut Thirst for Knowledge. I kind of think I do want to cut the Elixir, honestly. I don't know, we don't have a lot of life gain, so it's straight up just, if we stabilize, it does start going off. But that is the only time it's good. It's just really not good when we're not stabilized, when they're still like beating us up with stuff, because it just gains us 2 life a turn. That's like not gonna stave off a lot of damage. Yeah, I'll cut the Elixir here and cut a Chart a Course maybe, and then keep everything else here. And this is our blue-white control deck, really dedicated control deck here, very heavy into blue as well. So 16 blue, 6 white. We've got 6 blue sources and 5 white sources. Everything else is both. We do need double white on turn 2 for Doomscar, so I think I do kind of agree with that. That seems fine to me. We've got Fabled that's both. We've got 4 sources that are both white and blue. Our mana base seems pretty good in terms of the number of duels and stuff we have. Yeah, hopefully this can pan out for us in terms of mana. We also have Salundi Vision as another blue source potentially. That would be 7 blue sources and 5 white sources, and then all of the dual lands. All right, so Azorius Control it is today. Very dedicated control deck, very low creature count. We only have the 1 Wrath effect. I think that is the scariest thing about this deck for me, is our matchup against aggressive strategies could be pretty poor, because if they just play a creature like turn 1, that's going to be bad for us. Looks like we're against Amazonian here, which she is a very popular streamer of the game if you've never heard of her. So she may be streaming right now, which is pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and keep this. I'm going to be a little bit embarrassed if she is streaming, because I swear this isn't like me. I'm not an Azorius Control player. I swear. Oh no. Oh no. And she is on a red aggressive deck. So we're going to have a bad time, that's for sure, most likely. We're definitely playing this pathway on blue and foretelling the counterspell here. We don't have anything else to do except for a Warrant on Grim Lavamancer, which doesn't seem good. Green-red here. Yep, this is exactly the kind of curve I'm worried about in this deck. We will play our tapped farmland. We get to hold up Saw It Coming or Warrant here. Throw something back on top of their deck, just slow them down a little bit, make them recast it. But Resilient Kenra going back on their deck isn't that good for us, because it does get to give 2 more power to something when they play it, which is bad for us. I think we want to just run out Talrand as quickly as possible in this matchup and hope that Talrand survives here, because if Talrand does, Talrand can definitely take over the game with just casting more stuff. Alright, they do have the removal for Talrand. Unfortunate. Well, now we are all in on slowing them down again, so Inscription of Insight to put those back in their hand seems okay. Put them back in their hand and then Warrant and Warden next turn. Or I could just warn right now, just play a 4/4 that can block those. I need 8 mana to kick that, so I've got 5 mana right now. I could go just like Warden right now as a blocker. Next turn, Hieroglyphic Illumination, I have 6 mana. I need 2 more to hit the Kicked Insight. Kicked Insight would be a closer for this game. Yeah, I'll play a 4/4 here. Hope that that can hold them off a bit. They can use Lavamancer plus Kenra to do 4 damage into it if I block there, so we're just not going to block there. Just take 2, go to 9. Alright, just a tap land for the Maze Mind Tome's pretty good here. If we can get the life gain off of that, and obviously we can scry off of it. So that we can still put tome counters onto it without spending mana into it. We are hitting for 4 here. Lavamancer to the face, putting us down to 7. Well, that's got me very scared. Super aggressive play for sure. Chandra, Awakened Inferno. The ideal card against the control decks because we cannot counter her. And she just pluses 2 to start putting emblems on to deal damage to us every turn. Although I suppose she can also kill our 1 blocker here and we take 3 down to 4.
Utterly is the best way to destroy things.
Yep, let's go ahead and scry here, see what we might draw off of Illumination. We do want to hit 2 lands for Insight, but we don't have time for it anymore. So I think we scry to the bottom, we're just really trying to hit Doomscar now. But we need to deal with this Chandra somehow as well. Go ahead and draw 2 here. Thirst for Knowledge, Bag of Holding. 4, 5, 6. We have 7 mana here. We are just dead if we pass. With 7 mana, I can cast Thirst for Knowledge and then still Inscription of Insight. Scry first here. Search for Escanta, that's going to be too slow. Bag of Holding is going to be too slow here. Yeah, we have to Inscription of Insight, put their creatures back in hand, and just take the Chandra damage. Pretty sure Chandra just wrecks us here. We gotta find any way to, like, exile her. And I don't think that we have any, like, once she's hit the board, I think there's not much we can do to a Chandra. Drakuzeth is the play from our opponent. Well, we can kill that with a Declaration in Stone. I need 5 mana up for Voracious Greatshark, so I need to scry here rather than draw a card. So we Declaration Insight, we counter something off of Greatshark, and then try to kill Chandra with Greatshark. But we can only do 5 to her. And she's going to be at 6 because it's a +2. We take 2, go to 1 here. Maze Mind Tome of theirs, sure. They draw a card. Like, I have to allow them to play the Maze Mind Tome because I need to counter any creatures they have, because just taking a single damage from a creature is immediate lethal. I think I'd rather counter Lavamancer than Kenra because they can eternalize Kenra. And there's the Kenra. So we go ahead and scry now because we need to gain the life as fast as possible. Disallow to counter spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. No, I need something big here. I need like Sphinx's Revelation. That's just not going to do it for me. Oh my god, okay. Maze Mind Tome does give me the 4 life now. So I think I attack... Well, no, if I attack Chandra, she just goes to 1. Chandra just keeps stacking stuff up on me. This is so bad. I can put Chandra to 1, though, and then just Swift Response on Kenra. Use Tome to draw and gain here. Oh my god. Yeah, I think we draw main phase, see what we hit. Approach? Ooh, approach into Sphinx's Revelation is so big. Approach gains 7. Chandra can just minus onto Great Shark if I don't attack her. They don't have any other Eternalize. They could have other haste in red, though. That would just, like, end me.
I'm reaching my boiling point.
Pretty sure we Swift Response here, and then we go for the approach into Sphinx's Revelation for win.
Warm in here?
If we can. They do get to Eternalize that as a 4/4, so we're going to hold Great Shark to block with potentially here, depending on what they play. Pillar Flame for 2. We're going to stop in our upkeep and respond to the effect with Sphinx's Rev for the full gain, I think. Although I could just gain 1, draw 1 right now. That seems not like it's going to do it here. If they can't play a creature here, we get to kill Chandra. They do have Karuga, though. So I can gain 1, draw 1 right now, so that I know I have the mana for Approach of the Second Sun next turn. But then... Oh, God. And then I have the mana for whatever I draw as well. If I just do it on my next turn, I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so I gain 5, draw 5. Gain 5, I go to 8, take 3. I'm at 5 life. Trade there. I gain 7 off approach. I think I do this right now so I could cast whatever I draw. Yeah, I think I do this right now. Because I also really want to do approach here. We have Doomscar now. We can kill Chandra, but the emblems are still a thing. So if we kill Chandra, we take 3, 8. That's too much with approach. I think we foretell Doomscar, get ready to block Karuga. Resilient Kenra does 4. It can target itself, though. Oh no, because Kenra can target itself, we just die to Kenra here. Well, we definitely approach foretell Doomscar, but they have lethal on us here, because they just plus Chandra again and get in. Sphinx's Rev during our turn wouldn't have done it either, because then we're just tapped out. We gain 5 instead of 7 there. Well, instead of 8 total life. And just die. Oh, if they can't kill Great Shark, that gives us another turn, actually. Oh my god, okay. Kenra doesn't get haste? That's the thing. I thought Eternalize always gave haste. Okay, so I do get another turn, but I take 4 from Chandra, so I need to find more life gain or we're outies. We're outie 5,000. Seven away from approach. It's too far away right now. Let's see what we hit here. It's got to be life gain. Spell Pierce, that won't do it, but we get to kill the creatures. Past turn here. Die to the Chandra emblems.
Is it just me, or is it getting a little warm in here?
Direfleet Daredevil can cast like a Sphinx's Rev for themselves. Which is pretty good. If they dump all their mana into it, I can just Spell Pierce it, I guess. But we do die to the emblems, so we can just do it for fun. I am dead here. Well, that was a hard-fought one. I think I did about all I could there. We did get the first cast of the approach off. Just trying to get to that second one, but just too much of an aggressive start from the Gruul deck there. And of course, the uncounterable Chandra coming in hot. We didn't have a counterspell for her anyway, even if she was counterable, but Chandra definitely demolishing us there. Ooh, this hand is great against like literally anything, I think, because we have the Doomscar to just kill all the creatures that we couldn't deal with in the early game, and then we have the counterspell in the late game. We have Search for Azcanta to keep scrying throughout the game. Yeah, this hand seems awesome. We are not on the play though, so we are going to be playing a bit slow here. Our opponent does get to get off as aggressively as possible on the play. Alright, just the Llanowar Elves to start things off, so I think we're safe for now. Safe enough, I don't even think I need to foretell a Doomscar. I think I'm just going to get Search for Azcanta out right now, get as much value off of it as possible. Like, this is probably a game we can wait on Doomscar till we have 5 mana. Tyvar's the play from our opponent. Thirst for Knowledge, throw that in the grave. We're just trying to hit lands here, we're not going to have the mana to dump into that. I definitely think the biggest problem with our deck is that we didn't get enough exile-based removal in white to deal with any non-creature permanents, like, I forget what it's called, Banishing Light, stuff like Banishing Light we probably really would have wanted in this deck. I don't even feel like I saw them that often, but they would have been really solid here, because our biggest weakness is probably Planeswalkers. Like, outside of playing against an aggressive deck without drawing Doomscar, our biggest weakness is definitely Planeswalkers, because we just can't kill Planeswalkers, we just have to counter them at the right time. So Chandra, like, really destroyed us last game. I could see Tyvar doing a lot of work this game against us. Go ahead and scry one here. That is a land, we'll keep that on top. Play that this turn. 1 mana away from the Doomscar, but I could Swift Response here. I think I hold all my mana up. I can Saw It Coming if they play something really scary. I can Swift Response if I want to just kill Ulvenwald Hydra. Stop that damage. Depends how many cards they got in hand here. Just 3 in hand. Lifecrafter's Bestiary. That lets them scry every turn as well as draw additional cards off of all of their creatures they cast. I think I counter that here, and I'm okay to take 6, 7, 8, 9 here, because I'll just be killing every creature next turn if I get an untapped land off Search for Azcanta, which is like really the hope and dream here. If not, I can bounce a couple of the creatures, stave off some damage that way. Ooh, they did cast another creature, but the Old Growth Troll does get to basically recast itself. They can sacrifice it to make a 4/4 even if I kill it off Doomscar. Essence Scatter means no Doomscar this turn. Slow them down a bit then with Inscription, or do I Swift Response Essence Scatter? Swift Response to kill Hydra, we take 8. I don't know if we can afford to take 8, but then we get to just foretell Doomscar and we can guaranteed cast it next turn. Which gives +1/+1, so we take 9 if they +1 with Tyvar. Yeah, not foretelling the Doomscar actually panned out pretty poorly for us, but this would have been the earliest we could have possibly cast it, because we didn't have double white until this turn anyway, so no matter what, we're going down to 10 this game, even if we foretold it early on. But this next hit, because we didn't draw the untapped land, that is where we get punished for not foretelling the Doomscar. This next swing that comes at us is definitely my fault here. I think I'm just gonna pass. That might be like super bold, but that lets us hold up swift response, and we can scry and draw off of illumination to hit the land. Turn Timber Symbiosis. Well, that is not good. But I guess that's another creature on the board for us to kill with Doomscar. Get closer to Doomscar, just dealing with everything. Oh, they hit nothing. Well, that is rough.
Join me in battle.
Just 10 right there. Oh, they're expecting a Settle the Wreckage from us. It's a creature, return it to the battlefield on a land, and then they can sack the land to make a 4/4. Okay, no, we just kill Ulvenwald Hydra. Just kill the bigger one. Take 4 here. Scry off treasure map, see if that hits a land. It does not. Get out of here, Talrand. Maybe a Hieroglyphic Illumination hits a land. It does. Okay, now Search for Escalante could hit a land. It does, but it's a tapped land. Do I want a 6th mana here? Inscription for 8 is big. We're probably going to have to cast it to just kill a token, and like the 4/4 token that the troll makes. No, I think we toss that in the grave here. Drawn to a Supreme Will. Definitely Doomscar here, but Tyvar gets to keep going off, and the Old Growth Troll as well can make a 4/4. So Tyvar keeps making elves. So we need to draw into one of our creatures. We did throw one on bottom. We threw our Talrand on bottom, but we still have Warden, Voracious Great Shark, Scholar. Oh, Scute Swarm? Oh dear. Declaration in Stone does exile all of their elf tokens if I use it on their elf tokens, but I can also just use it on Scute Swarm right now so I don't get any copies of that. I can do that, and I still have the mana to use the Sunken Ruin to search for a card here, which is good. We take 2 damage off this Elf Warrior if they buff it with Tyvar, so that in conjunction with the Old Growth Troll could lethal me, but Inscription is unfortunately a sorcery speed card, so I can't bounce both of them. If I want to save myself from dying to Troll plus token, I have to Inscription of Insight right now. Oh yeah, that's so rough, because they get to use this ability instant speed, right? Yeah, instant speed effect, whereas Inscription is sorcery. This Inscription of Insight has not been good, I'm not gonna lie. But it looks like it does a lot of stuff, it's just too expensive, too much mana. Yeah, our only way to survive next turn is if we deal with this elf token. So we're Inscriptioning to kill 1 elf and we just take 4 from the troll. That's not awesome. I guess we make a 2/2 also. Do that instead. What? Well, I timed out by a tiny bit and it targeted our opponent, so I guess we lose. Not a game we were likely to win with Tyvar there, but we get to make a 2/2 and trade with the 1/1. That was the idea there. And they could have just used Tyvar's ability for lethal, putting a counter on the elf. Well, that was not a great way to end that game, but it was a game that we were losing regardless. A game that I may have just conceded already if it were not Cube, where super crazy things can happen. But yeah, my options there were to bounce the elf to just kill it right there, or just make a 2/2 token by targeting myself with Inscription, which was the idea. So I was going to target myself with Inscription to make a 2/2, so that way I could block and trade with the elf if they buffed it, and if they didn't buff it, it doesn't get to attack in, so that way maybe I get to just keep a 2/2 around and just take 4 that turn, and then I have a chump blocker if they play like a big non-trample creature. But I guess, to play around removal, probably should have just literally bounced the elf token, but that is such an embarrassing use of the Inscription of Insight. I think this card really needs to be an instant for it to be good at all, to be fair. But then it would be really good, because then you have scry 2, draw 2, or bounce 2 things at instant speed. Yeah, Inscription is definitely underperformed. So again, the biggest issue in our deck is the lack of removal for Planeswalkers. Let's go ahead and check out the sideboard, see if there's anything we can do about that. Not anything that we saw, not anything that we picked up here, but I am going to go ahead and take out this, not the Illumination, that was fine because it was instant speed. Just take out this Inscription. That card has been very bad every time we've drawn it, unfortunately. I want to just put in like a Cloud Blazer instead, gain some life, draw some cards, get a little chump blocker or something that can try to chip away at some Planeswalkers with evasiveness, or maybe even Thrix over Cloud Blazer because it hits Planeswalkers harder. Alright, so 0 and 2, this may be my first and probably only 0-3 run in the cube if it happens. That would be a sad way to see things go, because I think that we have a lot of the great blue-white control stuff available to us here. We are just not playing things on the same level as some of our opponents in terms of just having, like, Planeswalkers. Being able to play on that axis is very good. You know, it wouldn't be so bad that we don't have ways to deal with Planeswalkers outside of countering them if we had some Planeswalkers of our own, you know? But it just feels like anytime an opponent drops a Planeswalker on us, it's just very one-sided snowball effect. Alright, so drop a Fabled Passage here. Grabbing a blue, because we need blue on all of this stuff. We don't have a second blue yet. We just have the blue off Glacial Fortress. Playing against red-white here. They start with Ancestral Blade. Going to be a 2-2 out on turn 2. Treasure Map is the draw. Do I want a Treasure Map or just make Saw It Coming cheaper? I think I just drop down Treasure Map. Next turn I can cast Saw It Coming, or I can start scrying off of the map if I don't need to counter something. And everything in my hand is instant speed, so we'll just be planning on casting a lot of that stuff. Of course, we are against a very aggressive deck, so this is a matchup we just need our Doomscar, or we are probably out of it. Take 6 here, go down to 8. Anointed Procession. Doesn't do anything unless they try to make more tokens, so we can just counter whatever makes tokens later. I think that resolves. We just scry and maybe use Illumination here. Thirst for Knowledge does dig us towards like a Doomscar. We're taking 6 on the board now. We're going to 2 life, so we need to hit it like immediately. Yeah, I guess we keep that Cycle Illumination, because now next turn we're going to cast a Thirst for Knowledge or Saw It Coming if we need that. We're just not going to cast the Illumination here. That would be immediate lethal, so we have to counter that. Chandra would make 4 tokens here. Even if she made 2, it would be lethal. We are going to get hit for 7 thanks to the Mentor ability now. We are digging as far as we can go for Doomscar. Is there any kind of draw I could use in my upkeep? No, because I need all 5 of my mana when I draw into Doomscar, so scrying with Treasure Map I don't think does it for us here unless we have a 4 mana spell that could save us. We don't. Yeah, we don't have a 4-mana spell that can save us, so we just need to draw raw, hope for Doomscar. Maze Mind Tome is not going to be it here, so that is going to be lethal. Well, there's a first time for everything, and that will be the first 0-3 run in the cube. I guess Treasure Map does flip on 3, doesn't it? So Treasure Map flips and maybe the treasure tokens can draw us into Doomscar? Oh, it stays tapped though, so we don't get to draw off of it. Okay, but we could have scryed one last time. If we had scryed that one last time, we would have drawn Talrand instead of Maze Mind Tome for the turn, so we're still dead either way. But I could Thirst for Knowledge and then I have 4 mana up? That's not enough, but maybe that gets us to the Doomscar? Nope. Okay, well, I have officially dug farther than I thought possible, and still no Doomscars. That is going to do us in there. Definitely just ended up with not enough ways to deal with stuff that's already on the board. Because when the decks are curving out on us, they're dumping the things on the board if we don't just have the Wrath effect, especially against the Planeswalkers. Like, I think if it weren't for the Planeswalkers, we could have won Game 1 or Game 2. So we definitely needed that targeted removal to deal with things that are already on the board. Stuff like Banishing Light, but I don't remember seeing those that often in the draft. Probably saw them kind of early on when I was still taking other super powerful kind of fun stuff. So definitely not a great draft run. My first time really playing a hard control deck in the cube, and a terrible time it was, unfortunately. So 0-3 is the record for the day. Not sure I really like control that much in the cube. I have gotten beaten by it pretty viciously one time. That was when we were that rampy kind of Jund deck, and they had like the Settle the Wreckage, Doomscar kind of effects to stale out the game, and then they used Approach of the Second Sun into stealing our Vivian, and using the Vivian to dig closer to Approach the Second Sun by getting rid of the top 4 cards. That was like one of the most brutal losses I've had in the cube, and it was against a nice blue-white control deck, so I was like, maybe we can do it here. I think we had a lot of the best cards for it, Search for Escanta, Sphinx's Revelation, a bunch of stuff like that, but definitely needed more targeted removal. Even some more Wrath effects would have been useful there, give us some more versatility, or more survivability against those Boros decks like that one that ends the run for today. But as always, I would like to thank you all very much for watching. Can't win them all, and I will be back with more cube drafts, back to recalibrate, maybe get a 7-1 run with something not so slow, not so counterspelly, or maybe with the targeted removal to back it up next time. So, as always, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you again soon for some more Magic Arena content.